Hi everybody, it's Professor Michalsen here. We're moving now into the second third of our class, Gender and Crime, Seminar on Gender and Crime. And the first third of our class we talked about women and men, about how gender interacts with the crimes that people commit. Now we're going to be moving on to how gender interacts with victimization. And I finished our last lecture by saying this, but I want to repeat it. We often think about criminals and victims as being two totally different spheres, as being different individuals completely, one victimizing the other. What I'd like you to start thinking about is the fact that victims and the people who commit the crimes that victimize are often the same people, that just because you're one doesn't mean you can't be the other. And that in particular, how domestic violence, a very gendered crime by the way, domestic violence and criminal behavior often go together. Certainly sexual abuse and physical abuse, emotional abuse of children does not mean that those children will later become criminals, but it does mean that criminal behavior, let me put it this way, people who are engaged in criminal behavior are far more likely to have a history of victimization as children and also as adults, frankly. So I'd like you to start thinking about the ways in which victimization and criminal behavior actually do intertwine, and that we're not just a bunch of good guys and bad guys, or good people and bad people. That it's a whole lot more complicated than that. If any of you took criminology with me, you'll remember, I hope, that I said if there was one point to the class, and frankly to most classes that I teach, maybe not stats. Stats is pretty straightforward. But other than that, the point is that it's complicated. That none of these issues, if you're a justice studies major and women and gender studies major, none of these issues are simple. They're all very complicated. Okay, so on to our first topic in victimization as it relates to gender. Today we're going to be talking about the concept of corporate violence. There's a PowerPoint up on Blackboard that I'll be going by a little bit. Oh, that's my phone, sorry. Actually, it was my phone reminding me to record this lecture. See? I'm ahead of myself. Anyway, so the point is we're going to be talking about corporate violence. There's a PowerPoint I'm going to be going by on Blackboard. You'll see that it says corporate crimes. I didn't change the name, and I should have. I probably will. The difference is slight. Corporate criminality is not traditionally thought of as violence, and the concept of corporate violence is not a well-accepted one. But I'd like you to think about the concept of a corporation, of a business, or people working on behalf of a business, whether they can commit violence. If, for example, a company puts together a car, realizes later that that car has problems that may cause death, but makes the decision not to take that car off the market, I'm simplifying, because the potential monetary loss for taking it off is much bigger than having it go on the market and have people die or get hurt and sue later. People die, people get hurt because of that decision. Is that violence? How is it different from when somebody, I don't know, takes a tire iron and hits somebody on the head and that person dies or gets hurt? How is it different? There are people out there that would suggest, there are criminologists out there that suggest very specifically that there is not a difference, that one is violence and the other is violence. And frankly, that when a corporation does it, or people on behalf of a corporation does it, there's more harm. Because more people are affected. Other people, on the other hand, say that's not violence. There's buyer beware. There's all sorts of different decisions that people are making in terms of their own victimization. Now, as I'm saying that, that should also remind you of things that people say about victimization, or traditional idea of violent victimization. For example, if somebody was wearing some sexy clothes, man or woman, if somebody were wearing some sexy clothes and ended up getting raped, what were the choices that they made, that we start questioning what they were doing and how they played a role in their victimization. For those of you, again, who've taken criminology or have taken victimology, you may recognize that as the concept of victim precipitation. Slightly controversial idea that victims have some sort of a role in their own victimization, that may have some role in their victimization, whether it be being involved in a fight before they're victimized, or things that they're doing, any other thing that they're doing. Anyway, so let's get started. So corporate crime, recently I was interviewed by a group of 8th graders from Washington, D.C., and they're doing a project on the criminal justice system. And they were asking me about this idea of white-collar crime versus so-called street crime, and why perhaps there's a difference in how both of those things are policed. And I'd like you to think back to what you've learned so far. By this time, you've probably learned quite a bit now about the differences in how our society ends up policing different types of crime. We're well set up to police so-called street crimes. Police officers walk the beat in neighborhoods. They're not walking the beat, if you will, down hallways in offices. We're used to traditional policing. We talk about problem-oriented policing, community policing, as if crime only happens in neighborhoods, where crime actually happens really quite a lot in the business setting. Now, a critical criminologist, and I'm sorry, I'm going a lot into criminology. We'll go into the specifics in a minute, but let me just give you a reminder, a refresher, if you will. Critical criminologists suggest that our system of laws is set up in a way that is not in everyone's best interest. That people in power create the laws so that they can stay in power, and that the people who are not in power can stay out of power. Critical criminologists would say that our legal system is set up not to police the people who are sort of friends with, I guess, the people who are also in power. A critical criminologist would suggest, therefore, that corporate crime is not policed in the same way that other crimes are, that the crimes of, the poor or the underclass, whatever we want to call it, are quite policed so that people can stay out of power, and that the crimes of the wealthy, generally what are called white-collar crimes, are not policed in the same way because they're committed by people who have power. Now, in service to that idea, for those people who agree with the critical criminologists, we don't really have a real definition of what corporate crime is. We don't have definitions. We don't, as it says in the PowerPoint, we don't have clear definitions and distinctions. We don't really, a lack of regulations or sort of going back and forth about regulations creates problems for how we can police corporate crime. And there's different types of corporate crime that I won't go into now, because you'll go back into your notes from criminology. What I want to start talking about is the concept of gender. Now, corporate crime is being studied more and more and more. Certainly, created, the definition was really sort of pulled together by Edwin Sutherland, who's sort of pioneering in the study of corporate crime and even the conceptualization of corporate crime. Sally Simpson is a researcher who focuses on how corporate crime and gender come together. And in this case, what she's found and what other people have found is that women are more likely to be victimized in corporate situations. For example, women are less likely to unionize and therefore end up perhaps not getting the same benefits that people would get if they were union workers. So the idea that she puts forward is that women are more victimized. Now, again, we don't know. We know about murders. Okay, and this, anybody who knows anything, you guys should remember UCR and NCVS and this question of, for example, sexual assault. We know that the UCR doesn't capture. Uniform Crime Reports is the UCR. It's reporting to the FBI from all police departments across the country. The sexual assaults recorded by the UCR is far, far lower than what's recorded by victimization surveys such as the NCVS, the National Crime and Victimization Survey, because people are not likely, in the end, to report sexual assault to the police. It doesn't happen nearly as much as sexual assault actually happens. Murder, on the other hand, guess what? We know how much murder happens. There are some people that end up being murdered and no one knows. In general, prostitutes and homeless people are sort of invisible victims of homicide. But in general, when there's a body, there's a body. Corporate crime, on the other hand, is so difficult to measure. We can guess, we can hypothesize, if you will, that women are more likely to be victims, but we can't truly know. Sally Simpson's idea is that we should focus on that concept of whether gender interacts with the likelihood of corporate victimization. So, in the PowerPoint you'll see that I go through a set of examples of corporate crime. The example that I was talking about before with cars does refer back to the Pinto car explosion case. And there's a set of readings about about silicone breast implants, for example, about DES, which was a drug that was given to pregnant women and ended up causing really pretty dramatic it's not birth defects, it's sort of complications, cancers, and infertility for the generations that followed. I'd like you to think about why in the world gender and corporate crime would go together. And as you're writing in your discussion boards, I'd like you to think about, do you agree with this idea that gender would interact with that type of victimization? Do you think that it's possible that women might be more likely to be victimized? Certainly we know that children are victimized in corporate crime, and that, you know, there are places where there are a number of suggestions by criminologists that suggest that women are disproportionately victimized. Why? What's going on there? What have you learned so far this semester or in your other classes that might help us figure out why in the world gender would have any difference at all when it comes to victimization? The article that you read, let me just pull up our syllabus real quick. I thought I'd opened up our syllabus. I didn't. Oh, I opened research methods instead. Sorry. All right, so our readings for this class, there were 2 of them, I believe. So half of you read read an article about silicone breast implants, a classic example in this genre. I know the article's a little bit old, but it's a good one. And then the other half of you read about the Dalcon shield, also a little bit old at this point. Maybe I'll do a little bit of research on some other articles. Or if you wanted to do an extra credit to take a look at some other articles that might be a little bit more recent, then please just let me know. I'm happy to talk to you about that. Okay? So on the discussion boards, what do you think about these examples of how women were particularly harmed? Would it be the same harm? You'll see on the PowerPoint that I have a slide that's sort of meant to be funny. But the question is, if it were a penile implant that were causing men all sorts of problems, would there be the same reaction as silicone breast implants? Well, he wanted a bigger, you know what, that's his choice, and and too bad for him, it's his fault, buyer beware. Or would there be a different reaction? Because for some reason we have different reaction to men's penises than women's breasts. I don't know. I'd like you to think about that and think about how the gender of the person who was harmed might affect our reaction to that person and our reaction not only to that person but also to this so-called victimization. All right, so I'd like you to think about that. Does gender make a difference, and why? And let me tell you one other thing, actually. Here's another suggestion. So have your opinion, then whatever that opinion is, I want you to flip it and pretend that you're coming from the other perspective and try to argue that other perspective. You're welcome to say, I'm doing this, I don't really believe it, but I'm going to do it anyway. Fine with me. But I'd like you to argue it the other way and see how that makes you feel, okay? It was one other thing I wanted to say. Oh yes, there's a documentary called Absolutely Safe. I think I have a copy of it here. Well, anyway, I won't look now, but I'm pretty sure that I have a copy of it here, and I'm pretty sure that the library at Montclair has one. If you'd like to do an extra credit project, you can watch that video, Absolutely Safe. It's about breast implants, and write up a 1,000-word essay, my usual specifications, 1,000 words, describe me what you saw, and then connect it back. The bulk of the paper should be connecting it back to things that we've learned so far in class. Okay, everybody? So, as I said, now this third of the semester is about victimization. We are taking a break over spring break. I'm not requiring any work, but then starting on March 21st, you have readings due on rape and sexual assault, intimate partner violence, also sometimes called domestic violence, and childhood abuse. It's a very broad topic. Just a quick note, to some of you, it's on the syllabus, but I'd like to remind you that some of these topics can be upsetting. If you are finding yourself getting upset, either because of your own personal experience, or the experience of people that you love, or just because it's an upsetting topic, please come and see me. Or email me, or communicate with me somehow, and we can figure out a way to make you perhaps get the support that you need, or just feel a little bit better. These are not easy topics to talk about. So let's talk if you need to, okay? So, next class, we're going to be talking about, next week you're going on spring break, but the week after that you're going to be going back to it and getting into, the whole constellation of sexual assault and intimate partner violence and childhood abuse. All right, everybody, take good care, and remember, make an appointment with me if you have the time. Okay? Bye.